Alright guys, update number 3. I said I'd make a video once I pulled the rear end out of the 2005 Dodge Magnum out, okay? I have it out. Now I'm going to show you guys the difference between it all, alright? So I'm going to flip the camera. Alright, so you guys remember this, right? It's got, let's see if I can get this to move a little bit. There we go. Alright, so you see we got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts that hold that in place. All right, here is the old setup, okay? The old setup has the 1 and then the 2, and it's got one single one right there. Along with, you can see the axles, and you can see the way this rear end is set up, right? Very kind of, you know, I mean, it works, but it ain't nothing tough. And then you look at this, and you see the axle, different size, you know, how much thicker these axles are, how much beefier this rear end looks, right? Also, aside from that, you see 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one is right down there, okay? Also the same thing right here, the shocks where they mount up in the struts, or the shocks in the springs right there, same thing, okay? The only difference between it right now is literally I have them reversed, okay? Because I have the back end of the Magnum against the back end of the Charger. So what I have to do is I have to move one out of the way, and then I have to take this one, flip it around, and bring it back over. But as you can see, the similarity between 05 and 15, 10 years apart, and they are built identical. Mounting places, the suspension wise, all that stuff, they're pretty much identical, except for, you know, where the rear end mounts up and the axles and stuff like that. Along with that, remember, if I was telling you correctly, this car was an ex-police cruiser. You can see how thick and big that sway bar is in comparison to this rinky-dink little thing. So that'll also beef up the suspension a lot better than the original sway bar that was in this thing. I mean, you can also tell how much better that one looks than that one. You know, this is an 05. It's 20 years old. This one's 10 years old, okay? This one's a lot cleaner. Not so much. Not to mention the fact that if anybody hasn't noticed yet, this red Magnum was originally an all-wheel drive RT. So it was a 5.7 all-wheel drive. Now it's going to go from an all-wheel drive to a rear-wheel drive, and it's going to end up having a 6.1 base 426 stroker. Okay, so we're going from, I think it's 373 gears that are on these all-wheel drives. Let's see if I can find a label for it real quick here. Get out of my way. Smush my legs here in for a second. Yeah, this one's really hard. There's a number right there, but I can't see it unless I actually pull the parts off. But on the bottom, if I can read that correctly, yeah, it says, see if I can get it to show up in there. Yeah, it's so hard to see that. Let's see if I can get it from underneath. If you guys can read that, because I sure as shit can't. I'm pretty sure right there, right down there. Come on, yeah, right. If you guys can look right there, it says 373 on it. Yeah, so these are 373 all-wheel drive gears, okay? And that's open gear. It's not a limited slip. It's an open differential. My other Magnum that I used to own, my silver one, same thing with 373 gears. It was a one-wheel wonder. I mean, it worked great, but if you got stuck, you were stuck. There was no getting out of it. Took forever to get stuck, but once you're stuck, you're stuck. And the reason being, on the all-wheel drives, the rear differential is open, obviously. And then the transfer case isn't a normal transfer case. It's a clutch-driven transfer case, like clutch packs. Kind of like a transmission is, basically. But the way that it worked was you couldn't take the drive shaft off of the transfer case up to the front diff because of the fact that the way that it was set up in that transfer case, it would travel to the path of least resistance. So the clutches would turn and it wouldn't move the car. So if you got stuck, one wheel on this one would go, and then one wheel on the front would go, or none on the front would go at all. It was a great vehicle. Like I said, I only had one time that ever got stuck, and that was in like 4 feet of snow. Anyway, that's beside the point. So here we have, like I said, the new differential and rear cradle and all that good stuff versus the old one. Beautiful, clean, beefy axles, nice, better rear differential. Rusty, crappy from sitting so long, 10 years older. Kind of junk rear end. I wasn't a fan of how they built these rear ends in the first place. They don't look right. These axles too, they look, scrawny little things. Do they look like they can handle anything over 400 horsepower? No. These, on the other hand, look like they can actually handle a little bit of power. So this is definitely going to be an upgrade. Another thing I'm going to show you guys here real quick. On the topic, we were talking about the drive shafts, right? So you see that drive shaft right there? That is a 3-bolt drive shaft. So it's got 3 bolts that hold the drive shaft to the coupler and 3 bolts that hold the rear differential to the coupler, okay? There's a total of 6 of them, but 3 only hold the actual drive shaft in place, and it's like kind of like a triangle, or not triangle. Yeah, kind of like a triangle. One here, and then it skips one, and then one down there, so on and so forth, and then that's your drive shaft, as you can see. These, as you can see, they're not very thick. They don't have much support. Versus if you look at that drive shaft right there, you can see how much better built it is and how much thicker that sucker is, So that's a good thing as well. You're going to be doing all these changes and you're going to actually do a very big improvement overall with everything. And the best part about it is it all bolts right up. I mean, granted, there are some things that I'm going to have to... Let me back out of that. There are some things I'm going to have to take off of here to bolt onto here, and they're really, really simple things. ABS sensors. I think that is literally, honestly, it off of this old rear end. And the only reason is because the new ABS sensors on these newer ones look like this, whereas the old ones, as you can see right there, completely different. Different mounting spot, or different look in general, basically. So yeah, that's a lot of the things that you got to do when it comes to this. It's very simple. I mean, hell, these, look at the shocks. Okay, can you tell which ones are the old ones, which ones are the ones off of the 15, and which ones are off the 05? I mean, obviously you can tell from the rust, but let's just put this out here. This is one off of the Charger, and this is one off the Magnum. Okay, let's flip this. Let's show these part numbers here. Literally, pretty much the exact same thing. Same brand, pretty much same everything. Like same length. If you look at the two, move that out of the way. If you look at the two, they are literally the exact same. The only difference is this one might be a little bit longer simply because this is an all-wheel drive shock, but they mount the same all the way around. They have pretty much the same part numbers on them. There ain't much difference. And then on top of that, the all-wheel drive, not a lot of people know this, but the all-wheel drive has this, okay? I'm going to show you this real quick. This is what the all-wheel drive has. This goes right there. Now you may ask, okay, what's the difference? Well, these don't have that. The all-wheel drives had these for body spacers. They weren't much. It was half an inch, but they made the all-wheel drives taller. That's how they did it. On top of that, from here to here, these are wider. And that's mostly the knuckle. This whole knuckle assembly right here. They were made a little bit farther out. Once again, all-wheel drive. So that's why, once I get this changed over, I'll tell you this. These rims were, I don't remember what they came off of, but I got these rims from somebody that had them as a spare burner set on the back of his SRT8 Magnum. If you looked at that car from the back end of the car, it literally looked like the car missed leg day because of how far in these wheels sat in the wheel well. On the all-wheel drive, those wheels sit straight, flat with the fender, or with the rear quarter panel. You're talking 2.5 inches difference between the all-wheel drive setup of how wide they stick out versus a rear wheel drive. So when I get this rear cradle mounted into the Charger, I will make another video and I will show you the difference and how much more narrower, if you go back and look at my other videos that I made before I tore this rear end out of the Magnum, you will see the difference between these two and how much wider this rear end and cradle is than that setup. That's why when you take rear wheel drive, say like these Hellcat wheels, and you were to put them on this rear differential and this rear subframe assembly, they would stick out like crazy past the fenders and past the quarter panels, just because of how they're made and how much wider they're set up to be. It's the small differences that you notice between an all-wheel drive and a rear-wheel drive model vehicle. But like I said, I have both of the cradles out. I am going to go ahead and start moving these two around so that way I can get the 309 rear end out of the 15 Charger, mocked up to the Magnum, and then I'm going to flip around and I'm going to do the same thing with the old Magnum rear end onto the Charger. And like I said, the only reason I'm doing it with putting the rear end on the Charger, because I wasn't going to do it. The guy was going to just pick up the shell basically, or probably is just going to pick up the shell. But I want to be able to move this car if I need to move it before he gets here. So if I need to, pull it around the yard or take it to the shop or something, I need to be able to roll this thing. So whatever, and I don't need this rear end or any of that crap sitting in my yard and taking up space. I have people that can take my scrap, which I'll show you. This is all the exhaust. I'm going to get rid of the old springs and crap and stuff and some plastics that were underneath the Charger, the fender liner and stuff. But I'm going to get rid of all that, right? Come out and pick it all up. I don't want to bother wasting my time trying to load it up and try to make any money. It's whatever. I got some guys that'll come and get it for free. So I'm not going to waste my time doing that with this rear end and the front subframe on the Magnum as well, because I also have to swap out the front suspension along with the front subframe off of this Magnum, because the all-wheel drive subframe was different than the rear-wheel drive. I'll kind of go over here and I'll show you real quick if I can get my hood open. All-wheel drive, as you can see, that's a mounting point for the engine mount, and that's a mounting point. On the rear-wheel drives, they don't have that set up. They have a flat one that goes across on both sides right here. And the reason that they do this on the all-wheel drive is, as you can see, the axles right there. The front differential is mounted to the oil pan, and it goes through the oil pan. And that's where the axles connect to. Is this side connects to the actual transfer case, or the front differential. And then this side has a half shaft that goes through the oil pan to the front diff. All right. So this is different. The mounting points for the engine are. On top of that, they sit further forward so the transmission can sit back there properly, because it's all-wheel drive. It has the rear or the transfer case. So even the mounting point for the transmission is different on this versus the rear-wheel drive. Fortunately enough, at the factories, when they build these bodies, they don't know if it's going to be rear-wheel or all-wheel drive, so they make the mounting holes for both of them at the same time on these vehicles. So it just, once it gets to production, that's when they make the decision, is it going to be all-wheel or rear-wheel? Aside from that, the other really obvious thing is the steering shaft. That whole assembly with the power steering setup right there, the rack and pinion, they are bolted different onto this subframe versus the rear-wheel drive. On this subframe, they're bolted onto the top, as you can see right there, and on the back side right there. On the rear-wheel drives, they're actually underneath, almost right there next to the sway bar link, or the sway bar itself, like, I don't know, probably 4 inches away from the sway bar behind it. So this whole entire setup is not going to work. I'm going to be getting rid of and cleaning all this crap up, basically. I'm probably going to end up actually painting the engine bay black just to make it look a little bit better. I've got a lot of stuff that I've got to put in here. But luckily, like I said, I've got a whole entire parts car. That's why I'm going to be doing the swap, is because I have everything from blue that I can easily swap over to this. So many, many differences that you are going to see on the rear wheel versus the all-wheel. And in case anybody doesn't believe me, all-wheel drive. Okay, it's kind of cool taking something that used to be all-wheel and making it rear wheel, or vice versa. One that used to be rear wheel, making it all-wheel. It's really cool. But anyway, that's all for now. I'll make another video once I get both of these swapped over and into the vehicles. All right, stay tuned.